Hi, I'm Lucinda. At my sister's wedding, my parents smiled, raised their glasses, then hit me and threw me out when I refused to give her my $650,000 home. But that moment, that wasn't the worst of it. It was the years before, the silence they expected, the money they took without asking, the way they called it family, when it was really theft with a ribbon on top. What kind of family plans your betrayal like a celebration? You ever been the one no one expected to fight back? Until you did? It started with a text, 5 plain words from my mother. Dinner this Saturday, just us. Important. No emojis. No punctuation beyond the period that felt more like a full stop than a sentence. I stared at it longer than I needed to. These just us dinners weren't about catching up or celebrating anything. They were setups. Always had been. Ever since I moved out of Fresno and carved a life for myself up in Sacramento, these invitations only came when something was brewing. And this one felt like gasoline soaked into a wooden floor, waiting for a spark. I replied simply, "Sure, what time?" My hands were steady, but my gut twisted. Not in fear. Those days were long gone. It was something else. Like I already knew what was coming, and I was showing up anyway. Saturday came too quickly. I finished the last round of email approvals for our latest software update, shut my laptop, and walked out the front door of the house I bought entirely on my own. Not through inheritance, not through a co-signed loan, not through someone else's favor. Just me, working 12-hour days, sacrificing vacations, living below my means while running a startup no one in my family ever really believed in. They'd never stepped foot in the house, not once in 5 years. But that never stopped them from dropping hints. You live alone in a big place like that? Don't you think it's a little much? I drove the 2 hours to Fresno with the radio off. No music, no podcasts, just the hum of the road and the low static of my own thoughts. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the restaurant, the sun had slipped low, casting everything in a kind of gold that didn't feel warm. They were already inside, of course. Corinne, my mother, never waited in cars. Elwood, my father, never waited for anything. I stepped in and spotted them immediately. A corner table, white tablecloth, 2 glasses of wine, half full. Neither of them stood up. Corinne looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. There she is! I slid into the seat across from them. Elwood gave me a nod. No hug, no warmth. Small talk came first, as expected. The weather, traffic, Marjorie's upcoming wedding, which had apparently become a family-level national event. Then came the drop. You know, Elwood began, swirling his wine like he actually cared about legs on a glass. This wedding is important, for the family, for how we're seen. Corinne leaned in, voice soft and sweet in a way that always meant something sharp was coming. We were thinking, since your house is so spacious and you live there alone, maybe it would be the perfect wedding gift. I blinked. You want me to give them my house? Corinne's smile didn't move. It wouldn't be giving. It's a gesture. You'd still be part of it, of course. Everyone would know it came from you. You mean like how everyone knew who paid for your bankruptcy lawyer? Her smile cracked for a second, but she caught it. Elwood and I just thought it made sense. You don't need all that space, sweetheart. And Marjorie and Peter, they're starting a life. I sat back in my chair, folded my napkin slowly. Not because I needed to, just because I didn't trust myself to speak right away. I see. No pressure, of course, Elwood said, which in our family translated directly to you better agree, or we'll make your life hell in silence. I stood up calmly. Well, thanks for dinner. I've got an early pitch Monday. We're expanding into new hospital networks, so I'll be buried in numbers for the next 48 hours. Corinne blinked, confused. So, you'll think about it? I smiled. Sure. I walked out without hugging either of them. Back through the entrance, past the hostess who gave me a pity smile, as if she could sense the frost behind the linen and wine. Outside, the parking lot was mostly empty. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and sat for a minute before pulling out. On the way back to Sacramento, the streets thinned. Headlights passed like ghosts. Somewhere outside Madera, I found myself slowing as I passed a familiar cul-de-sac. The house was still there, our old one, the one I rescued from foreclosure when I was 27. I'd sent the money quietly, signed the check without my name, told the bank to keep my involvement confidential. They lost it again 2 years later anyway. I didn't slow to look. I just noted it. Like marking a grave I wouldn't visit. By the time I reached home, the moon had climbed over the cedar fence in the backyard. I walked in, slipped off my shoes, and turned on the kitchen light. It was quiet, clean, mine. I stood in the doorway, hand still on the light switch, and let the silence settle. They didn't ask. They expected. They assumed my success meant ownership didn't matter, that my sacrifices were meant to benefit them, that because I had more, I owed more. I whispered into the stillness. They don't see me, just what I can hand over. I set my keys on the counter and walked to the window. The reflection of the kitchen light bounced off the glass, warping the outline of my face. They'd always seen me that way, distorted, simplified, convenient. I shook my head and reached for a glass of water. They thought I'd say yes. I was the quiet one, the helpful one, the background daughter. I rinsed the glass, turned out the light, and headed upstairs. I said I'd think about it, but I already knew the answer. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before my alarm. Sleep had come in short, fractured pieces. I wasn't nervous, just unsettled. The kind of unease that settles in your bones when you're walking into a place that looks familiar, but hasn't felt safe in years. I ironed my navy dress, pinned my hair back in a way I knew my mother would call plain, and slipped the small envelope into my clutch. A vintage gold locket inside, engraved with a message I had picked carefully. Something sentimental. Something I knew Marjorie wouldn't bother to read. The venue was just outside Sacramento, a vineyard with white fences and rows of lanterns lining the path. I arrived early. Always early. It's a habit you keep when you grow up around people who only notice when you're late. The parking lot was already half full. I nodded to a couple of distant cousins I barely recognized, waved to an old neighbor, and stepped inside. The air was filled with soft string music and the clinking of glassware. People moved around like a choreographed routine, smiling, adjusting centerpieces, practicing their small talk. I scanned the place cards: Table 1, Table 2, the wedding party, extended family, no Lucinda. I checked again. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they spelled it wrong. Maybe someone moved the card. But no, it wasn't there. A server passed by, and I gently stopped her. "Excuse me, could you help me find my seat?" She glanced down at her clipboard, flipped a page, and pointed toward the back. "You're at Table 14, just past the restrooms, near the fire exit." Table 14 had a broken chair, a mismatched centerpiece, and 3 empty spots next to it. I sat down anyway, adjusted my dress, smoothed the fabric like it might matter to someone. It didn't. 10 minutes later, a woman in a red satin dress walked up to me, balancing a glass of champagne in one hand and a clutch in the other. "Oh," she said with a bright smile. "Are you with the staff? I've been trying to find someone to help set up the gift table." I didn't blink. "No, I'm the bride's sister." Her smile faltered, and her face flushed the color of her dress. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're just—" "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. She backed away quickly, mumbling something about needing to find her seat. I watched her go, then looked down at the envelope in my lap. I held it for a moment, thumb tracing the edge, then stood up and walked it to the gift table myself. Nobody noticed. Nobody stopped me. I placed it gently on the pile of glittering boxes and ribboned bags, next to something that looked like it belonged in a Tiffany catalog. Mine looked small, quiet, like me, As I turned to head back to my table, a flash went off. Marjorie had arrived. She stepped out of a black sedan in a white dress that shimmered like glass under the sun. Photographers surrounded her, and Mom and Dad flanked her sides like royal guards. All beaming, all posed. I stood in the doorway and watched. I didn't wave, didn't smile. I just watched. And somewhere in the haze of camera shutters and applause, my mind pulled up a memory I hadn't invited. I was 12. My birthday was coming up. We'd planned a small party, balloons, pizza, nothing fancy. But that morning, Marjorie had a sore throat, a low-grade fever. So the party was canceled. No cake, no cards, just silence and the smell of Lysol. At 15, they forgot my birthday entirely. I reminded them 2 days later. Mom said, "Oh, honey, it's been a crazy week." I never reminded them again. Back in the reception hall, people were making toasts. A few guests mentioned the gorgeous new home Marjorie and Peter would be starting their life in. "It's such a blessing," one woman said. "So generous of the family," another nodded. "I heard it was a group gift. From the parents, maybe?" I didn't say a word, just kept walking. My table was still half empty. Nobody asked about the house. Nobody looked at me when they spoke about it. I could have been wallpaper, or furniture, or one of the servers they mistook me for. I sat back down, poured myself a glass of water, and listened to the laughter echo across the room. You can take being forgotten. You can endure being the extra place setting, the name they misspell, the seat next to the kitchen door. But when people start writing you out of your own life, when they assign your worth to someone else's storyline, it stops being forgetfulness. It becomes erasure. And in that moment, I realized something cold and clean. They weren't erasing me. They were rewriting me. I didn't sleep that night. After the reception, I drove straight home, hands stiff on the wheel, the envelope I had brought still tucked in my clutch. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't said goodbye. No one noticed. By the time I reached the driveway, it was nearly midnight. I turned off the engine and sat in the dark, staring at the porch light I'd left on. The house, my house, stood as solid and silent as I had been that entire day. But something inside me was cracking. My head throbbed. Not the kind of dull pressure you fix with a glass of water and a lie down. It was sharp, rhythmic, an alarm bell going off inside my skull. I made it to the kitchen, grabbed the counter for balance, and the room started to sway. The next thing I remember was the flash of paramedic lights painting my ceiling red. I woke up in a white room with beeping machines and fluorescent lighting too bright for human comfort. The nurse taking my vitals was older, gray at the temples, eyes soft but wary. "You gave us a scare," she said gently. "You came in with a severe migraine. Dehydration, too." I nodded weakly, voice hoarse. "How long was I out?" "Just a few hours." She adjusted the IV in my arm, then paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Wait, Lucinda Rowan?" Something shifted in her expression. "I remember you. Years ago, you were about 9. Came in with a hairline fracture, said you fell off a step stool, but—" She trailed off, and I could see her chewing the inside of her cheek. "We weren't sure. About the story, I mean." My throat tightened. "I remember," I said. "I was told not to make a fuss." She exhaled. "I'm sorry we couldn't do more. You were quiet. Too quiet." I didn't answer. What could I say? That silence was my specialty? That I learned early how not to need anyone? By morning, they discharged me with a warning to rest and hydrate. I signed the release form, walked back to my car, and sat in the driver's seat as the sun broke over the trees. On the way home, I took a detour to a storage unit I hadn't opened in 3 years. I found the box in the far back, labeled Records, half covered in dust. Inside was a file folder with hospital paperwork from 2002. The ER intake sheet was still there. I scanned it, flipping past the signature my mother had scribbled on my behalf. Under the incident notes section, in red ink, "Suspected domestic situation. Inconsistent injury report. No further inquiry." My hand trembled slightly as I took a photo of the page. Then another, then all of it. I slid the entire folder into a new envelope I kept in my desk drawer, labeled "Legal in Emergency Use Only." They thought I wouldn't keep anything. They thought I'd forget. But I did remember, and I had receipts. Back upstairs, I sat on the edge of my bed, letting the room settle around me. I could hear the hum of the HVAC system, the faint rustle of tree branches against the window. And then, my phone buzzed. A fraud alert. New account opened under my name. Credit card ending in 62132. Balance, 18,049. 13s. I stared at the notification for a long time, then opened the bank app. The card was being used for event services, venue deposits, catering, even a balloon arch rental. I recognized the business name. It was the wedding planner Marjorie had tagged on Instagram weeks ago. I'd scrolled past it, not thinking much. Just another curated post in a gallery of staged joy. I called the fraud department. "Yes, I'd like to report unauthorized activity," I said. The rep was helpful, courteous. He sent me the scanned application form they had on file. It was my name, my birth date, my social security number, but the handwriting wasn't mine. I knew that loop in the capital L, the way the M dipped too low. I'd seen it 1,000 times, on permission slips, on birthday cards she never signed with love. Just Mom. Corinne. She didn't just use me, she impersonated me, and I wasn't going to let her hide behind a smile this time. I walked to my office, turned on the lamp, and opened my laptop. I hadn't spoken to Silas in nearly 2 years, but I knew his inbox was still the same. He was one of the few people who knew the full scope of my family's ability to pretend and manipulate. He used to joke that my childhood sounded like a courtroom drama that never made it to trial. Subject line: Family financial misconduct. Urgent review. I attached the credit report, the photos from the storage file, the card application with Corinne's handwriting. And finally, I added a note in the body of the email. Silas, I need your help. I'm not looking for a fight, but I'm no longer willing to lie down and take it. They crossed a line, and this time, I'm drawing one of my own. I hovered over the send button, then clicked. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like reclamation. My mother forged my name. Now I'll sign theirs, on a court summons. I didn't wait for a response from Silas. The email was enough to put the wheels in motion. For now, I needed to stay ahead, not just emotionally, but tactically. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about leverage. And if they had taught me anything, it was how to hold my tongue until I had the upper hand. The next morning, after 3 cups of bitter coffee and 1 burned slice of toast I didn't eat, I drove across town to the county records office. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Didn't need to. The building hadn't changed much since the last time I was there. Beige walls, flickering ceiling lights, and a front desk with a plastic divider that smelled faintly of old toner. I filled out the request form, slid my ID through the opening, and waited. The clerk, a woman probably in her late 50s, looked up at me after typing something into her system. "You're requesting sealed medical documentation?" she asked. "Yes, from when I was a minor." She hesitated. "This was marked as private by your legal guardian. There's a note here. Your mother signed a waiver to block external review." I exhaled slowly. "I'm not external. I'm the child." After a beat, she nodded. "Give me a few minutes." When she came back, she was holding a thin manila envelope. No labels. Just a rubber band around it, like it had been forgotten on a shelf. I opened it in my car. Photos. My left wrist, bruised. A progress report from the ER doctor. A scanned document declining investigation into suspected domestic violence. Signed in handwriting I recognized instantly. I had always assumed I tripped, that the bruises were my fault, that the silence afterward was normal. Turns out my silence had simply been convenient. They protected the story, not the child, I murmured. I drove home without music, without stopping. At one point, I realized I was gripping the wheel too tightly, fingers pale at the knuckles. Once inside, I locked the front door, walked straight to my office, and pulled out the black folder I had begun labeling just weeks earlier. It was already half full. I added the latest documents and snapped the clasp shut. Then I opened my laptop. It was time to face the part I hadn't let myself say out loud. I scrolled to a spreadsheet I had created during my first year of therapy. Back then, it had been called Contributions, Personal Only. Now it felt more like evidence than catharsis. $36,800. Bank transfer to save their home from foreclosure. $1,400. Credit line paid down for Elwood's medical bills after his surgery. $7,150. Down payment for Marjorie's car when she couldn't get financing without a co-signer. $220,000. Wired in multiple deposits to the gift registry account labeled Joint Family Fund for the wedding. An account created by Corrine, with my name listed as Optional Contributor. Total, $278,750 over 4 years. Almost $300,000. No reimbursements, no acknowledgments, not even a thank you card. I typed a single line beneath the last entry. This is what it cost to be the one who never said no? Then I clicked open our family group chat. I hadn't said a word in it in over 6 months. Typing. Hi. Please do not refer to the Sacramento house as anyone's but mine, publicly or privately. There will be consequences if that line is crossed again. Send. The read receipts rolled in. Corinne reacted first. A thumbs-up emoji. Elwood didn't respond. Marjorie, as expected, came in hot. Wow, that escalated. I tapped back quickly. It didn't escalate, it landed. And then I muted the thread. No more noise. That evening, I began printing. The credit card forms, the stolen signature, screenshots from the wedding registry, hospital scans, screenshots of the chat. I labeled each section, slipped it into plastic sleeves, and filed it neatly into the black folder. I didn't label it revenge. I labeled it if needed. Because the next time they tried to twist the truth, I wasn't going to argue. I was going to show them. They always thought I wouldn't fight back, not because I couldn't, but because I hadn't. Yet. By the time I zipped the folder shut and slipped it into my handbag, the sun had already dipped low, bleeding orange across the horizon. I didn't need to double-check the contents. I knew exactly what was in it. Proof, precision, and boundaries written in black ink. What I carried wasn't a threat, it was insurance. I arrived at Prairie Vineyards an hour before the ceremony. Same venue, same pristine walkways. White chairs lined in perfect rows, strings of fairy lights swaying gently over the wooden arch. It was picturesque, syrupy and clean, like the kind of family fantasy Corinne clung to like pearls at a funeral. The valet greeted me with a smile. I returned it with a nod. No small talk. Inside, I kept to myself. I moved through the crowd like vapor, offering polite smiles, quiet nods. Some guests recognized me and gave the familiar, awkward greetings. So good to see you again. Or, you look so lovely. Translation. We weren't sure you'd be invited. I hadn't planned to say anything. Not yet. That changed when Harlan found me. He ran up during cocktail hour, cheeks flushed from chasing bubbles with the other kids. He looked up at me with bright eyes, still catching his breath. Mom said the house is already ours, he blurted. She said Aunt Lou just needs to sign after the vows. Silence fell around us like dropped glass. I crouched down, smiled gently, and brushed a piece of hair off his forehead. That's a big secret, bud. You probably shouldn't say it out loud. He nodded, oblivious to the sea of adults watching us. I kissed the top of his head and sent him back to his game. As I straightened up, I noticed 2 women watching from a few feet away. One leaned toward the other. That confirms it. The house was the wedding gift. The other shook her head. Wow, that's bold. I didn't correct them, not yet. Another man approached me near the refreshment table. He wore a tailored gray suit and a slightly too friendly smile. So, is it true? He asked, balancing a flute of champagne. That you gifted your place to them? That's incredibly generous. I looked him in the eye and took a slow sip from my own glass. Is it generous? I asked. If no one asked. His smile faltered. It's just what people are saying, he added. I'm sure it is. I turned, leaving him with the weight of that answer. It was almost time. The buzz of the crowd shifted as people began moving toward their assigned tables. I waited near the gift table, still holding my clutch. Then I pulled the envelope out. Black, sealed, unlabeled. I placed it gently on top of a pile of ribbon-wrapped boxes and pastel bags. No fanfare, no eyes on me. Just one simple movement, like setting down a stone. Inside were photocopies of everything: the wedding planner charges on the stolen credit card, the registry screenshots, the forged signature. Attached to the front was a single page. This is not a gift, it is theft. Across the room, I met Marjorie's gaze. She was mid-laugh, hand on Peter's arm, glass in the other. Her smile faltered for just a second. Just long enough. I didn't blink, she didn't either. But she knew. And so did a few others who had overheard Harlan. Whispers were already starting to loop through the crowd like smoke. My name was on lips again, not in praise, not in blame, but in curiosity. Let them wonder. I walked to my seat and sat without adjusting my dress. My pulse was calm, my back straight. If they wanted a scene, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be loud, it would be permanent. I didn't move from my seat as the crowd shifted toward the reception tent. The sunlight had softened by then, draping everything in gold that made the vineyard look like a postcard, if you squinted past the rot beneath it. A man tapped the mic near the head table, clearing his throat to quiet the clinking of forks and murmured gossip. The MC. He welcomed everyone, made a few harmless jokes, and then said the words that triggered something tight in my chest. We'd now like to invite family members to share a few words about the couple. Corinne stood up immediately. She walked to the microphone with the elegance of someone born to perform. Her voice was syrupy, calculated. This day, she began, wouldn't have been possible without the support of our whole family. And most importantly, Lucinda. She smiled directly at me. My daughter. Her generosity made this dream real. We are so grateful. Applause? Some polite, some confused. I stood slowly. I didn't look at anyone in particular. My heart was steady. My heels clicked softly on the wooden floor as I crossed the room, each step a quiet refusal. I reached the mic. Corinne had already sat back down, dabbing her lips with a napkin as if nothing she said was incendiary. I took a breath, then spoke, calm and precise. I appreciate you all being here, because some truths deserve an audience. Chairs shifted. Glasses paused midair. The house at 3025 Deer Trail Drive, I continued, is not a gift. It was never discussed. It belongs to me. It was earned, not inherited, not bestowed, and certainly not offered as a wedding favor. Whispers started. I didn't flinch. I have documentation, I said, of fraudulent charges, financial coercion, and misuse of identity, my identity. It's all in the black envelope on the gift table. I looked toward Corinne, then to Elwood, then to Marjorie. No one here is entitled to rewrite my life for convenience, and I'm done letting silence be mistaken for compliance. There was no shouting, no trembling in my voice, just steel, just the kind of clarity that cuts deeper than any insult ever could. The room didn't breathe. Then a chair scraped. I turned. Elwood. He was walking toward me, jaw tight, fists clenched. Enough, he said under his breath, though everyone could hear him. You've said your piece. He didn't stop. There was a half-filled champagne glass on the table next to him. He grabbed it, and before I could step back, he swung it. The rim of the glass struck my forehead, hard. A sharp, hot bloom of pain exploded across my face. The sound it made was worse than the pain. A wet crack, followed by gasps. Then silence. I touched my head and felt something warm trickling down the side of my cheek. Blood. My vision blurred, but I stayed standing. Corinne shot up from her seat, face contorted in something that wasn't shame or concern. It was fury. "You had to do this here?" she shouted. "After everything we've done for you, you are not part of this family anymore." The room split in two, some guests frozen in shock, others already backing away, eyes wide. A server rushed forward with a folded cloth. Someone yelled for a doctor. I took the towel without a word. I pressed it against my head, holding it gently as I turned to face the crowd. "This was never a wedding," I said. "It was a performance, and now the curtain's down." I walked out. No one followed. The path outside was lined with rose petals. They stuck to my shoes as I stepped over them, blood dripping quietly onto the white gravel. The paramedics passed me as they arrived, but I waved them off. "I'm all right," I told one of them, "just not surprised." I reached the parking lot, unlocked my car, and sat down without starting the engine. For a moment, I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. There was blood. Yes, but there was also something else. Freedom. I wasn't just kicked out of a wedding, I was expelled from a lie. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even bleed that long. Back home, I cleaned the wound with surgical precision. A butterfly bandage closed the gash just above my brow. It would scar, but not enough to be visible unless someone was looking for it, and most people never look that closely. The next morning, I woke up with my inbox already flooded. Not from friends, not from family, from strangers. A clip of the champagne glass striking my head had gone viral. One of the guests had posted it before the reception even ended. No caption, just, "Weddings bring out the worst." But that wasn't the headline that made me sit up straight. It was a familiar face on the screen, Marjorie, sitting on a plush cream couch across from a polished morning host. She looked radiant, not a scratch on her. "She's always had trouble letting go," Marjorie told the host, folding her hands carefully in her lap. "We tried to be there for her, but resentment can rot everything from the inside. We thought she was getting help." The host leaned in, feigning concern. "So you're saying this wasn't a one-time outburst?" "Oh no," Marjorie said, her voice hushed. "There's history, emotional instability, a pattern of jealousy." I muted the video. I didn't need to hear more. They were doing it again, rewriting me. This time for public consumption. Comments were already pouring in. "She ruined her sister's wedding." Classic bitter sibling energy. "Entitled much." Imagine pulling this kind of stunt on someone's big day. I set the phone down, walked into the kitchen, and brewed coffee without looking at the counter. My hands moved on autopilot, but my mind was razor-focused. I opened my laptop, logged into the secure server Silas had set up. The folder was already updated. Case. Vexley. I clicked open the video file first. Guest footage of the glass hitting me. Clear, angled, time-stamped. Then the screenshot of the credit application. Corinne's handwriting. My name. The forged signature circled. Tax documents followed. Gift taxes never filed. Wire transfers falsely categorized as family restructuring contributions. Silas called just as I was reviewing the defamation clause of the filing draft. "They're going to try and spin this," he said. "And honestly, they're doing a good job. But we've got their soft spot." "Tax?" I asked. "Tax, fraud, forgery, identity misuse, emotional abuse. Let's go federal." I paused. "File it." Silas didn't hesitate. And just like that, my name was attached to a civil suit, against my own parents and sister. For the first time, I didn't feel shame in that. They made it public. I'd make it legal. Later that day, Silas's team released a timeline to the press. No interviews, no opinions. Just facts, medical records, payment logs, court documents, photographs, eyewitness statements, screenshots from the wedding video. The media took it from there. Startup CEO presses charges after wedding assault caught on camera. Daughter claims family stole her identity, house, and reputation. Was it a wedding or a setup? For every slanderous comment online, 3 others questioned the official narrative. Some reporters reached out for statements. I declined. I didn't need to explain anything. The truth wasn't fragile. It just needed daylight. By Thursday, my aunt from Oregon messaged me. "I saw what happened. I always thought something wasn't right with how they treated you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." A cousin I hadn't heard from in a decade sent a text. "Lucinda, I wish I had said something sooner." I didn't respond. I wasn't collecting apologies. I wasn't telling who suddenly found a conscience. I was cutting the rope that tethered me to the story they kept trying to write me out of. They called me unstable. I called them to court. The courthouse smelled like filtered air and dust, clean but stale. I arrived early, sat in the corridor outside courtroom 2C, and watched the second hand circle the clock above the door. People passed by, lawyers in navy suits, clerks holding clipboards, strangers avoiding eye contact. None of them knew my name, not yet. Silas arrived 5 minutes before we were called in. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. He handed me a bottle of water, gave my shoulder a quick squeeze, and walked in with calm steps. He had done this before. I hadn't, but that didn't mean I wasn't ready. Inside, it was colder than I expected. The judge was already seated. Corinne, Elwood, and Marjorie sat at a separate table, each with their own attorneys. I didn't look at them. My eyes stayed fixed on the desk in front of me, where the case files were neatly arranged. The judge began reading the case summary: civil suit for identity theft, emotional damages, and coerced financial transactions. There was no mention of love, history, or forgiveness. Just facts, bullet points, dates. Silas stood and requested permission to introduce video evidence. "Your Honor," he said, voice clear, "this footage was recorded 15 years ago by a third party during an unannounced visit to the defendant's home. It has not been altered. It is time-stamped and authenticated." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Silas inserted the USB, and the screen beside the bench flickered to life. There I was, 16, maybe 17, sitting cross-legged on a living room carpet. Corinne was pacing. Her voice was sharp, angry. I watched myself flinch before she even raised her hand. Then came the shove. I hit the bookcase. Hard. It toppled slightly, books raining down around me. I didn't cry. I just scrambled to my feet while she kept yelling. Then the door closed. The clip ended in silence. Corinne's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection! Relevance!" "Overruled," the judge said without looking up. No one in the courtroom moved. Not even Marjorie. Silas didn't speak immediately. He let the silence stretch long enough to make the air feel thick. Then he continued. "This incident matches the injuries documented in the 2002 ER report. The defendant, Corinne Vexley, claimed at the time that the injuries were the result of an accidental fall. The hospital flagged it as inconsistent." The judge finally looked at me. "Ms. Rowan, would you like to make a statement?" I stood. My voice didn't shake. "I stayed quiet because I thought it would protect something, our family, our name, our reputation. But silence didn't protect me. It protected the people who hurt me. What they did wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, a choice, repeated, calculated, and concealed." That was all I said. The judge nodded once. "We'll break for 20 minutes before delivering the verdict." When I stepped into the hallway, I could feel the heat rise in my face. Not from shame, but release. Like something long lodged in my chest had been exhaled. 20 minutes later, we were called back in. The judge's voice was even. "In the matter of Rowan versus Vexley, this court finds the defendants Corinne and Elwood Vexley liable for civil assault and emotional damages. The court also finds the plaintiff's evidence regarding identity theft and coercion credible, and orders restitution to be paid. The defendant, Marjorie Vexley, is not found criminally liable, but is determined to have been complicit in coercive financial manipulation and defamation." The gavel fell once. That was it. Outside, reporters lined the steps. I didn't stop for photos. I didn't make a statement. I left through the side exit and kept walking until the street noise faded into the background. A week later, I sat across from Silas again. Not in court this time, but in a quiet notary office 2 blocks from my apartment. "You sure?" he asked, pen in hand. I nodded. "Completely." He turned the document toward me. It wasn't just about restitution. It was more than damages. It was emancipation. I signed a legal petition to sever familial responsibility in all state records. I requested my legal name be modified to reflect sole personal authority over assets. I blocked all inheritance claims from the 3 of them. I gave them nothing, no piece of me, no tie to chase later, no claim to undo what I had rebuilt. Silas didn't say anything as he gathered the papers. He didn't have to. I stood, shook his hand, and left without looking back. Some names you inherit, others you reclaim. The papers were signed, the ink dried. Legally, it was done. But healing is quieter than that. It doesn't come with a gavel or a notarized stamp. It comes slowly, sometimes in silence, sometimes in the rhythm of ordinary days, where no one calls to demand a piece of you. 6 months later, I stood in the middle of an empty living room in Monterey Bay. Boxes were stacked neatly against the wall. The keys to my Sacramento home had been handed over the week before. I didn't cry when I locked the door for the last time. There was nothing left inside to miss. The rental was smaller, modest, some might say. But it had windows facing the sea and a tiny garden out back with wild lavender I could smell through the open kitchen window. No family portraits, no heirlooms, just books, fresh linens, and space that felt untouched by expectation. I spent the first morning unpacking what little I brought: clothes, records, a single framed photo of me at 17, laughing with a friend whose name I could no longer recall. The picture wasn't about memory. It was proof that I'd once been joyful without an audience. In the evenings, I'd walk along the cliffs barefoot, letting the tide edge up toward my ankles, the air sharp with salt and fog. I didn't check the news. I didn't answer unknown numbers. I let the rest of the world shrink. One Thursday, I opened my laptop and found a draft I'd written months ago, a letter to Corinne that I never sent. It began, "Dear Mom, I used to ask myself why I wasn't enough. Then I started asking what made her more. And now, I don't ask anything at all." I hovered over the delete button for a few seconds, then clicked. It didn't feel like erasing something. It felt like closing a window that no longer looked out onto anything worth watching. Later that week, I stopped by the local community center. I'd seen a flyer for a mentorship program. They needed volunteers to help high school students navigate college applications. It was a Tuesday evening when I first attended. I kept to the back, listening more than speaking. One girl, maybe 16, spoke about being overlooked in her family. She said, "I could win an award, and my brother could sneeze, and they'd praise him louder." Everyone laughed, but her eyes didn't. Afterward, I found her by the water cooler. "You mentioned something about a scholarship deadline," I said. "If you want help with that application, I've got time." She blinked like she didn't believe me. "Why?" "Because someone should," I answered. She paused, then whispered, "You're the first adult who believed me without asking me to prove anything." I smiled but said nothing. I didn't need to fill the space with explanation. Some truths don't need volume to be valid. That night, I walked home with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Not triumph, not vindication, just the kind of quiet that doesn't ache. Weeks passed. The seasons turned again. I still got letters from attorneys. Corinne's lawyer tried to negotiate inheritance terms. Marjorie's PR team issued a statement that blurred facts into sentiment. I didn't respond. They could spin their stories however they wanted, but they couldn't use my silence to write the ending anymore. One evening, just before dusk, I walked down to the beach barefoot. The tide was retreating, and the sand was cool under my feet. The breeze tangled through my hair. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain my absence from anything. No calls, no corrections, no just checking in texts I didn't ask for. I paused at the edge of the surf and closed my eyes. They wrote me out. So I wrote myself back in, as someone they could never erase again. Forgiveness is not freedom. Walking away is. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. We're raised to believe that holding families together is a virtue, but no one teaches you what to do when you're the one being held hostage by their silence, their rewriting, their expectations. I didn't fight my family out of anger. I fought for myself because I finally believed I was worth defending. And if this story has shown you anything, I hope it's this. Being quiet doesn't mean you're powerless, and choosing peace over approval is one of the bravest things you can ever do. Maybe you've been the one holding the family together, too tired to speak, too loyal to walk away. Or maybe someone once tried to erase you from your own story. If that's you, I want you to know. You're not alone, and you're allowed to rewrite your ending. Let me ask you something from the heart. Have you ever been made to feel like a stranger in your own family? Or had to protect yourself from people who should have protected you? If this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments. Drop a 1 if it hit home, or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't connect, I'd love to hear why. Because these stories aren't just mine. They're ours. And they only grow stronger when we talk about them together. If you felt something here, something real, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss the next story. Who knows? It might be the one you didn't know you needed. Until next time, Lucinda.